these are some compliance nightmares that we wanted to talk a little bit about, just for people that either weren't using a software or didn't have their leases properly accounted for, or this could happen to you. You could be totally fine, but this could happen to you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these things and how you could prevent this from happening to you. And these are real examples. So if you missed the beginning, these are real things that happen to people, real clients of ours. So wanted to prevent, have this as a way to prevent them from happening to you. So first nightmare we wanted to just talk quickly about is an overpayment that we have found that a client was making. So there was a situation where within the lease, the client had a contract that had a clause that had a rent holiday on the anniversary of every year in the lease. So maybe you guys have leases like that where every year you get a free rent period or something like that. So they were using Excel to track this information, and they hadn't transcribed it over properly. Basically, they weren't actually accounting for that free rent. Their accounts payable was just on auto. They were just making the payment every single period, and they weren't taking advantage of that free rent. And the landlord wasn't telling them, because why would they? So they had ended up overpaying over 6 years, $648,000. So definitely not ideal. That's a lot of money to be overpaying. And so how could you potentially avoid this? Well, make sure you're reading through your contracts appropriately. That's the biggest one. But also using a software certainly would have helped with these people. And that's how they found out about it, actually, is because they started using software and they realized, oh, we're getting this alert that says we have free rent every year. So definitely want to make sure you're familiar with your contracts and your clauses, and you also have those types of critical alerts so that you're not just in autopilot overpaying for things that you don't need to. Another real scenario or nightmare that happened to people was we had a company that there was an acquisition and there was a tenant improvement allowance that they'd had on one of their leases. If you don't know what a tenant improvement allowance is, sometimes in the contract, the lessor will stipulate that the tenant can use X amount of dollars to add in tenant improvements or leasehold improvements into the building. And so that can come as like a credit, like on a future rent, or it could be like a cash allowance, some sort of a lease incentive. So there was a company that acquired another, and they had a $2 million tenant improvement allowance that was transferable in the event of an acquisition or sale. So they did not, you guys probably know, an acquisition, a lot going on there. They did all this in Excel. They did the acquisition in Excel, and they overlooked the $2 million. The acquiring company never received the money. They just didn't see it. And so how did we find this? Well, we found this because they were entering their lease data into the software, and they were like, wait, we have this tenant improvement allowance we never got. So, again, being more familiar with your lease data and also, using the software would be able to help. And it did end up helping these people with their tenant improvement allowance. Something else also is, how else could you avoid this? Being more familiar with the guidance, having accountants, whether that's through a software or a consultant, to help if you have an acquisition, so that you're not missing those types of incentives or accounting rules as you have an acquisition. Another nightmare situation that happened is there was an escalation that happened. This one's not as much, $79,000, still nothing to turn up your nose at. The company was escalating their rent payments early on their lease, and they ended up overpaying around $79,000 before it was caught when they started using software. So there was a situation where this company took possession of some leases. Lease term started in January, ended in December, had annual escalation. But in the lease, there was a stipulation that if it starts other than January 1st, which it did, the payment would be in effect to the end of the next calendar year, blah, 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 i.e. there wouldn't be payment increases for 18 months in that case. But they didn't capture it correctly. They put the payment schedule wrong into their Excel sheet, and they increased the payments early. And that would have continued to happen every single year, but they ended up using the lease accounting software, and we're able to catch that early, as opposed to continuing to overpay for the rest of eternity. So those are some ways to help avoid that. And again, just being more familiar with your leases. I know that you guys might have a lot of leases out there and might not have the time to read through every single one of them, but just being more familiar with your leases, whether that's through Excel or through a software, is going to help you avoid these nightmares. And then another situation, so we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Excel, but this is a real situation where a company had an employee who was disgruntled, deleted some lease data out, and so this can happen to you. I mean, if you have a situation where you may have it today, where one person, maybe you are the one person that's managing an entire Excel sheet for an entire group, you're the only one that knows how to use it. So, this employee deleted some stuff, wasn't happy. And if they had been using Excel, this company, they would have been in big trouble because there's nothing checking or nothing preventing you from deleting it. However, they were using a software and it prevented them from deleting it because there was an alert that got sent to their manager and they rejected the changes. So we'll talk about how great Excel is, but this is certainly one of the limitations because anybody can edit anything. It's great because anybody can edit anything, but anybody can edit anything. So that definitely could have been avoided. As it was, for you guys, it could be avoided with some workflows and software so that those types of changes are not processed.